Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Money Collective group life coaching session for October. Today, we are going to be talking about our money personality and how the money personality is really important for self-awareness as we break out of lockdown, bust out back into the world, and how we can use the strengths and the weaknesses of our money personality to make sure that we come out of this lockdown absolutely flying with what it is that we want from our experience, rather than just at the whim of personality and reactions. So Simone and Mel are also with me today, so we're going to have a little bit of a chat about that. But I just wanted to start off, money personalities. We might call them money personalities, but based on the rule that how we do one thing is how we do most things, our money personality and how we spend or save or work with our money can often reflect on how we show up in other areas of life. So how we spend our money might be how we spend our time or energy. Do we spend more than we have to give? Do we save more than we need? Do we use it in a way that's really in alignment with our values? That's essentially what we want to look at today. So our money personalities can be broken up into 4 dominant areas, and then we all share little bits of each one. So saver, spender, avoider, and risk taker are the 4 areas. Each of them have their downfalls and each of them have their real strengths. So I think what we'll do is just jump straight in. And for anyone who's watching this on the replay, if you haven't done the money personality quiz, that will be linked with this wherever you're watching it, on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere. You can do that little quiz. It only takes about 5 minutes, and it is amazingly accurate for such a short overview quiz, which is awesome. So let's talk about the spenders, because even though they've had their internet shopping, the spenders are the ones who really are going to bust out of the starting blocks. Credit cards waving, organising, to see people, to give hugs, to give and to spend their energy and their money on the things that they really feel like they've missed out on. Spenders are wonderful people because they are playful and energetic and sociable, often have a lot of friends, but as a result can end up not quite realizing quick enough when they need to sort of pull back and conserve on putting the credit card away or saying no to another offer of being social and giving you energy. So yeah, being a playful spender is wonderful, but work out what it is that you actually want from each of those interactions, the people you want to catch up with, the experiences that you actually want to enjoy. Because, you know, for some people, lining up outside Kmart was probably not the fulfilling experience that they set out with.
Until they get inside, then they're like happy.
But then they get home and think, well, maybe I could have spent that amount of money on this one thing that I actually now remember I really did want.
They just really love it. Those Kmart shoppers, they're in like buyer's remorse right now.
So, you know, I guess we use that lining up outside Kmart. Is that really how you wanted to spend your first moments of freedom from lockdown? And that's where we get to now. We've got, you know, if you're watching this, probably 24 hours advance warning before you might be allowed out. And for those of you who are going to take their time emerging from hibernation, you can put a little bit of a plan in place.
I think, like, for me on that, Angela, is like, because I can kind of see myself, you know, you're walking around the shops for the first time, and I'm partial to a bit of Kmart, but it's not really my go-to. But it's more so like it's the things that your brain says to you when you're walking around the shops, like, oh, I haven't bought anything for ages, oh, that's okay, or we deserve a treat.
Yeah.
And so, like, sometimes having a bit more of a budget, like if you're prone to that sort of behavior, having a budget, like when you're out and about at the shops, or having a list before you go, so that you're not making those decisions as you're walking around the shops. I find that really helps me sometimes.
Yeah, definitely having a budget and a list. And knowing what it is that you want. Like, do you want to just go to the shops and spend money? Go for it, but make sure that you've put a little bit of thought into it, so that you're not going to end up in a difficult conversation with your partner, perhaps, or with yourself afterwards.
Like if you think you might end up with a difficult, one of those difficult conversations, maybe address it beforehand. You know how sometimes we avoid those conversations and we're like, oh, well, we'll deal with it later. But maybe say, I'm going to the shops. I'm thinking of, buying this. I'm really looking forward to it, so that you've kind of said it before you go, and then it's like not really a big drama. You don't need to feel the guilt when you're actually at the shops buying the thing.
Yeah, and I love that, being able to say, I actually really need this. This is something I need to do. I want to do it, and I need to do it, and I'm looking forward to it.
Even if it's a guilty pleasure, that's fine.
Absolutely.
It's better to approach the shopping without the guilt.
Yeah, and then it just becomes pleasure. You don't have to attach any guilt to it. It becomes what you do for fun.
I think too, because sometimes when I'm in those situations, and then I'll be like, and it's all going through my head, oh no, I can't buy all this. And then I'm like, and then I almost put things back on shelves, and then I'm like, and then I walk away with nothing, and I haven't bought anything because I've guilted myself out of doing any purchases, and I've turned into avoider.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to see. As we go through this, there'll be those little sub parts of the personality that come up, and essentially then the negative bits, or the bits to be more aware of, they're the ones that squash the fun. They squash the fun, and so you can just be aware of them and ahead of the curve. What is it that you need to keep the fun in the process?
That's really fascinating, isn't it? Because once you do the money personality quiz, because I've done it so many times now, and it does change over time. You kind of not always the same. It brings you back to it, doesn't it? And you go, so just having that awareness, that's what you're saying, isn't it? Before we go.
Absolutely. Yeah, having that awareness of what it is that you want. So understanding, we're going to go through the rest of the personalities, but understanding what your dominant personality is, so you can start to see in the patterns of behavior what your default reactions are. And then you work out whether they're helpful or not. And if you do want to just go and flash your credit card around, put a limit, take your debit card on the other account with a limit, and flash it around and have a great time. So let's look at the savers. The savers, well, they've been loving lockdown, putting an extra away. So definitely there's different combinations, obviously, of money personalities. For me, I'm a saver, but I'm a saver who likes to spend. And when I spend, I love to get a discount. So I feel like I'm saving when I'm spending.
Yes.
So I'm much more likely to make calculated spends. But then sometimes that takes too much effort, and I go, stuff it, I'll just buy it anyway. So it's about finding that balance of, as the saver, who's a bit more precise, who often likes to do things by the rules, do things the right way. That's, in the collective of that personality type. So things to be aware of in our money personality details. One of the first things that comes up is you might be difficult to live with because you don't communicate clearly. And that's I do it by the rules, and I want to spend and also save. But if I can't do that, well, stuff it, just buy it anyway. And then people don't really understand where you stand. What is it that you want to do with your money and your time that you've been hoarding and holding on to?
And a lot of that personality internalizes things, like not communicating really well is really, and maybe if you're a saver too and your partner is a spender, you can make them feel really guilty, and those conversations can be really hard if your partner or even friends are of a different persuasion when it comes to their money. Because there can be then a lot of judgment of others in that, but that stems from judgment of self.
And this is where, if you're a saver and you like to do things by the rules and do things right, that's the awareness there, is that's right by you. And so really just having a fair go. Fair go for yourself and fair go for others, because
that's it. And be kind to yourself too. Like sometimes I reckon savers are don't make some purchases because they feel guilty, like because we become really habitual, with our patterns and how we behave. And so because spending isn't something that's comfortable or comes naturally, those decisions can be really hard, to make. Yeah.
And also, as you said there, Mel, that guilt, if you come out of lockdown and you are the sort of person who loves to go and catch up with people at restaurants and cafes and goes out and does things, you might start looking back over your bank balance going, oh dear, what's happened? This feels a bit out of control.
So
and being torn between the values. Sorry?
Throwing it out there. Are you two both savers? I'm pointing because you're both on my left-hand side of the screen.
I'm a saver.
I'm a saver, and I'm married to a saver.
I'm a saver.
Yeah. And it is, unfortunately, it's sort of prized, like, oh, saver. That's great. It's almost like prized in society. Oh, good girl, or good boy, or does it things by the rules. So it's a really quite a tricky personality to find the things that you actually value and are important to you in that mix. And it's great. Sorry, go.
I was just going to say, it's interesting that you say that, it's seen as a prized kind of position to be in, because quite often I wish so much that I was a risk taker.
Yes.
Like I really wish that I had more of that side.
Yeah.
How do you feel about coming out of lockdown with being a saver, Simone?
I don't know that it's going to change a huge much. Yeah, I think it's just going to keep on steadily plodding along.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah.
And is there a part of you that will feel uncomfortable if you have to say no to, for example, once we can all go to cafes and things?
Yeah.
Hey, let's meet up at a cafe. Let's go for a massage, or let's go out for the day to a day spa. I don't know, all the sorts of things that
everyone's going nuts around you.
Yeah. Look, I think if other people say, hey, let's do this, usually I'm going to say yes and try to make it happen, in whatever way I can. So yeah, I don't avoid things like that because it's going to change my little steady plot along.
Yeah.
And that's
really
great awareness.
Exactly. And that's all it is. And I love having spender friends because they make my life much more fun.
Yeah.
And I think too, like when you've got like a saver personality, being really aware of what your values are. So if your values are friendships and things like that, to make sure that you still engage in those and then just do it in a way that's comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at that risk taker that Simone mentioned before. So the risk taker, they might be the investor or the business owner, or the sometimes the flashy car owner. Might be a bit of debt behind the facade. They're kind of brave and happy and just have a go at life. And for the risk taker, the newness and the change that we've experienced in lockdown is not really much of an issue. Where we looked at the saver who likes to do things by the rules, there are no rules. So there's a little bit of discomfort there. But for the risk taker, there's never really any rules. They write their own rules. And they just have a go. So as we come out of this situation, which was hard, there is no rule book, but the risk taker is going to be a great person to have with you, and also a part of yourself to allow to bubble up and take a bit of charge, because they're quite powerful, the risk taker.
They are. I reckon you can recognize a risk taker. Like if you think about the last, few months of lockdown, where some people, because I feel like everything kind of went really in, and people really took that step back from things, you'll find that the risk takers are still making decisions. So the people around you, like I see them, there might be still buying things or buying property, selling and doing things. And buying businesses. I see this all the time, and you're like, okay, and then it's just like business as usual. It's just like because they're really focused in their lane about and seizing opportunities, and so they're much less impacted by, like what you were saying, those things that most people would be.
Yes,
and they can see things and opportunities that most people don't see as well. They're fascinating.
Yeah, and it's
I say
different
because it's not me.
Yeah, that's not a big aspect of my personality, but I do really admire it when I meet it in other people, and we find that quite inspiring as well, because they're the people who
and scary.
And scary, absolutely, because where there's big wins, there's also big losses to be made, and in order to navigate as a trailblazer, essentially. They're often trailblazers. They'll start businesses to fill holes in the market. They'll take a job or change jobs without qualifications, or they'll just go on a whim. I have a brother-in-law like this who is doing fantastically well, just having a go.
And I think that type of personality is really well matched, and measured if you've got a saver risk taker personality, but it can be really out of balance if you're a spender risk taker, because then you're almost like, oh,
if you've got heaps of debt and it's not really secured on anything, you're probably a spender risk taker. So coming out of lockdown is probably, I'm going to make a little bit of a blanket assumption, I'd love to hear from some risk takers if they're watching this, probably going to be fairly same for risk takers, because lockdown or no lockdown, COVID or no COVID, either or, they've got to focus on where they want to go.
They do.
Just make it happen. Yeah. But to keep making it happen, as you said there, Mel, there's those rules and systems and checks and balances that a saver personality brings in that are really helpful for setting a foundation that a risk taker can then launch from.
That's right. And you either need to, we would advise or encourage, risk takers to either find that if they don't have it innately within themselves, or they haven't got it in a close relationship, to try and, find somebody, a trusted relationship probably, where you're getting some sort of sense of security. Someone to bring you back down to give you a reality check, I suppose.
To actually check the facts and check the numbers. Which is really helpful. And then the fourth personality we talk about is the avoider, and the avoider is the thinker. There can often be the peacemaker sometimes, sort of making things work for everybody. Usually quite conservative and like to think things through, so need to gather quite a lot of information. So if you are predominantly an avoider around your money, you may also find that coming out of lockdown, you're sort of an avoider of being really clear on what it is that you actually want and need. So this is the time to really think about what you've learnt about yourself in lockdown. And we all have a little bit of avoider, and we all have a default to avoider in certain aspects of life. So if you default to avoider in money, you might not in relationships, but each of us might have an area of life where we default to just not really wanting to look there. And so, parents-in-law and family members inviting you over and wanting to come to your house, and people inviting you out places, and you might just actually have really enjoyed the peaceful, quiet time of lockdown. In my family, we've really
overwhelming. All that stuff, really overwhelming, too much, and then you don't know what to do or what to choose, and then you end up choosing nothing.
Or you choose it all to please everyone,
and then you make a decision, and then that was hard, and then you go out and try something else, and you go and then
and you end up frazzled and exhausted and not having fun, which is key component to all experience. Am I having fun? So definitely to help the avoider and any of us is to get clear right now in the next 24 hours, the sorts of experiences that we want to have coming out of lockdown, and go gently on ourselves with kindness and with compassion. And I read an article that was really well written about how bears come out of hibernation. Because we've been in lockdown for so long, it is essentially like social, emotional hibernation in a way. And they don't come out of hibernation and start gorging themselves on food. Because
thanks for the heads up.
They don't gorge themselves on social interaction either. They come out skinny. We're not coming out skinny. We're all coming out larger, unlike the bears. But then they slowly, as the food sources increase, as spring turns to summer, they eat more, they socialize more, and by the time they're ready to go back into hibernation, they've had a fat, jolly old time. But they come out slowly and they rest far more in those early weeks out of hibernation as well. So we don't have to go full throttle into spending or enjoying what we've missed out on, because there's always going to be enough time to enjoy it.
Yeah, like if we are like maybe that spender personality who just wants to rush into the world, like you can still get that shock of like, because you get it excited, you make all your plans, and then, it's all too much and I want to slow down. You've always got that choice to slow down and back out. And if your first experience isn't great, then you've got another chance for the next time as well. So whether it's to do with your spending or your socializing. Yeah.
Because each of those interactions is simply feedback. So we can only learn how to play the rules of this new way because we haven't done this before. This is the longest lockdown if you've been in Melbourne Metro. And even for regional Victoria, it's been on and off and on and off. And for the people in New South Wales and in Sydney, these are the longest lockdowns I think anyone in the world is that doing. I don't know, I haven't looked at the stats. But so there are no rules on how to come out of it. So the only way to make the rules is to write the rule book. And you can only write the rule book through self-awareness and then a little bit of trial and error. And failure is only feedback to help you with next time, as Mel just said. Being really clear on your values, what it is you actually want from each experience that you're saying yes to.
And everybody's going to want different things around you.
Everyone's going to, absolutely. And being able to manage each person's expectations as well by being clear on what it is that you want so that you can say yes or no and why. And people are going to be really accepting of that. Because if you can say why.
Be really accepting of each other. Exactly. And you might find, because you've joined us in this wonderful discussion today, you might have more awareness than other people too, so we've got to be super kind to those people, you know what I mean, and struggle, and it's not even your job to bring them to that awareness. It's just to hold space for people and really concentrate, because the better you can manage yourself in these situations, the better it will be for everybody that you love.
Yeah. And when you've got that self-awareness to not be triggered by someone else's stuff, you can just let them be with it.
And even if you are, just be kind to yourself, and just even if you have acknowledgement of it, you need to be super proud that you've acknowledged, you might not have dealt with it in the moment the best way, but you're like, oh, wow, because that awareness that you're building, like it's a muscle, isn't it, Angela? Like you learn how to use it. Yeah.
And that's the trial and error of life, to start to understand how it works for you and how best you can show up for others. So to wrap up today, there's some real fundamental basics of happiness, fun, having a great time, coming out of lockdown, whatever it is you're doing. There's some real fundamental basics of the things that the majority of us value. One of them is family and friends. That's going to be on most of our lists. Another one is less pressure at work or in life, less stress. We really value creating experiences of that. And that's why for many people, lockdown has brought a little bit of relief in some areas of stress and more in others. And then another thing that the most of us value is time in nature. And right now in the Yarra Valley, it is a beautiful sunny day, which is always lovely because we haven't had many of those this year. So those three things, friends and family, reducing your stress and having time in nature, they don't involve spending money. They don't involve giving away your energy to things that are not important to you. And for most people, those will feature somewhere in their values. So have self-awareness of your money personality. See how that influences other areas of your life. Write your own rules with kindness and compassion. Give yourself a fair go, give others a fair go, and glide gracefully out of lockdown at your own pace with your own rules. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Mel. Anything else to add before we finish up?
No, thank you.
Awesome.
I'm very grateful for that. I'm going to take note.
Yeah, absolutely. Take note and keep checking back in. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye.